I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office on a Tuesday afternoon when my secretary buzzed the intercom to announce an unexpected visitor. I almost dropped my coffee when she walked through my door, the woman I'd married 6 years ago, the woman who'd vanished without a trace on our honeymoon in Costa Rica, the woman I'd spent 2 years searching for before accepting that she was probably dead. But Elena wasn't alone. She was holding the hand of a 4-year-old boy with dark hair and my eyes, a child who called her Mommy, and looked at me with the curious confusion of someone meeting a stranger his mother had told him stories about. "Hello, James," Elena said, her voice carrying a new hardness I'd never heard before. Gone was the soft accent I'd fallen in love with, replaced by something careful and controlled. Gone was the flowing dress style she'd always favored, replaced by practical jeans and a leather jacket that looked like it had seen serious use. "I know this is unexpected. But we need to talk." My son. I was looking at my son, a child I'd never known existed, brought to me by a woman who'd disappeared from our honeymoon suite 5 years ago and left me to wonder if she'd drowned, been kidnapped, or simply decided that marriage to me was a mistake she needed to escape. "Elena," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "Where have you been? Who is this? What happened to you?" She glanced around my office, at the family photos that still included our wedding picture, at the private investigator reports I'd never quite been able to file away, at the life I'd built while believing she was gone forever. "His name is Diego," she said, lifting the child so he could see me better. "And James. I'm sorry. For everything. But I need you to understand that I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because staying would have gotten you killed." Welcome to Family Reckoning. I'm sharing this story today because sometimes the people we love most disappear not because they don't love us, but because they love us too much to let us die for their mistakes. Drop your city or country in the comments below so I know where my family is watching from. Also, please note this video contains fictionalized elements for storytelling and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or places is purely coincidental, but the message about secrets, sacrifice, and the price of protection is devastatingly real. The sound of Elena's laughter at sunrise used to be my favorite way to wake up during our courtship. She'd make coffee in her small apartment kitchen while humming songs in Spanish, her voice bright and musical in the way that made everything about our future together seem possible and beautiful. We'd met at a business conference in Miami, where I was representing my accounting firm and she was working as a translator for international clients. Elena was everything I'd never known I was looking for: intelligent, independent, and possessed of the kind of quiet confidence that comes from someone who'd built a life entirely on her own terms. "I came to the United States when I was 19, she told me during our third dinner together, stirring her coffee while telling me about her background. "My family was complicated. I needed to start over somewhere I could build the kind of life I wanted." Elena spoke about her past in general terms that suggested difficult family circumstances she preferred not to discuss in detail. I respected her privacy and focused on the woman she was becoming rather than demanding explanations about experiences that clearly caused her pain. "Some people come to America running away from things," she said during one conversation about her decision to immigrate. "Other people come running towards something better. I think I was doing both." Over the 18 months of our courtship, Elena revealed pieces of her history gradually. She'd grown up in Colombia, in a family involved in what she described as import-export business that had become dangerous and unstable. Her father had died when she was 16, and her mother had remarried a man whose business dealings were not always legal. "I left because I wanted to build something clean," she explained when I asked about her family's current situation. "Something that belonged to me, something that couldn't be taken away by other people's bad choices." Elena's English was perfect, though accented in a way that made every conversation sound like poetry. She worked as a freelance translator and had built a small but successful business providing language services to companies doing business in South America. "Your work must keep you connected to Colombia," I observed during one conversation about her translation projects. Professionally, yes. Personally, no. I haven't been back since I left, and I don't plan to return. My life is here now. My future is here. Elena spoke about her past as something definitively concluded, a chapter of her life that was finished and wouldn't be reopened. I found her determination to focus on our shared future rather than relitigating old pain both admirable and romantic. When I proposed to Elena after 15 months of dating, I did it in her apartment at sunrise, with coffee and the Spanish music she loved playing softly in the background. Elena Maria Santos, you've made me believe in the possibility of building something beautiful from nothing. Will you marry me and help me build a life that's worth the fresh start you gave both of us? She said yes while crying tears of joy that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than happiness, from relief, maybe, or gratitude that she'd finally found something stable and safe to build her new life around. We planned our wedding for 8 months later, a small ceremony with my family and the few close friends Elena had made since coming to the United States. Elena's family couldn't attend, she explained, due to ongoing political instability that made international travel difficult for them. I wish you could meet my mother, Elena said during our wedding planning. But it's too dangerous for her to travel right now, and it's too dangerous for me to go back. Someday, when things are more stable, maybe we can arrange a safe meeting. Our wedding was beautiful, intimate, and perfect in every way that mattered. Elena wore her grandmother's dress, which she'd managed to bring with her when she'd left Colombia. She cried during our vows, not from sadness, but from what seemed like overwhelming gratitude that her new life was beginning officially. James, you gave me something I never thought I'd have, she whispered during our first dance. A future that I chose, instead of one that was chosen for me. For our honeymoon, we chose Costa Rica, close enough to Elena's homeland that she could hear familiar accents and eat familiar foods, but far enough away that it felt like neutral territory where we could begin our marriage without the weight of either of our pasts. The first 4 days of our honeymoon were perfect. We stayed at a small resort on the Pacific coast, spent our days exploring rainforest trails and beaches, and our evenings planning the life we'd build together when we returned home. I want children with you, Elena told me as we watched the sunset from our hotel balcony on our 4th night. I want to give them the kind of childhood I never had, safe, stable, full of choices instead of fear. That was the last normal conversation we had. Elena went to bed that night in my arms, whispering about how grateful she was for the new life we were building together. When I woke up the next morning, she was gone. Elena's side of the bed was cold when I reached for her at 7 a.m. Her suitcase was missing. Her clothes were gone from the closet. The only trace she'd left behind was her wedding ring on the bathroom counter and a brief note written in Spanish, Lo siento mucho. No tuve otra opción. Te amo. I'm sorry. I had no other choice. I love you. I called hotel security immediately. They reviewed security camera footage that showed Elena leaving the hotel at 3:17 a.m., carrying her suitcase and moving with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Senor Morrison, the hotel manager explained, the cameras show your wife leaving voluntarily. She was not accompanied by anyone, and she did not appear to be under duress. She simply walked out of the hotel and got into a taxi. The Costa Rican police treated Elena's disappearance as a missing person case for exactly 72 hours before reclassifying it as voluntary departure. Adults have the right to leave their marriages, their honeymoons, and their lives if they choose to do so. Mr. Morrison, we understand this is painful for you, Officer Rodriguez told me during what would be our final conversation about the case. But your wife left a note, took her belongings, and departed the country using her own passport. There is no evidence of criminal activity. Elena had flown from San Jose to Bogotá 6 hours after leaving our hotel room. From Bogotá, the trail went cold. No record of onward travel, no credit card activity, no phone calls, no contact with any of the friends or professional associates she'd known in the United States. My new wife had simply vanished into the country she'd told me she'd left forever, leaving me with a Spanish goodbye note and questions that would consume the next 5 years of my life. I spent 3 weeks in Costa Rica, working with private investigators, consulting with American embassy officials, and following every possible lead about Elena's disappearance. But the investigation revealed only one clear fact: Elena Santos Morrison had planned her departure carefully and had resources I'd known nothing about. Mr. Morrison, the private investigator explained during our final meeting, your wife withdrew $8,000 in cash from ATMs over the 3 days before her disappearance. She also made phone calls to numbers in Colombia that are registered to what appear to be law firms or security consultants. Security consultants? Companies that provide personal protection services, identity documentation, and travel arrangements for people who need to disappear quickly. Elena hadn't left impulsively. She'd been planning her departure for days, possibly longer, while lying beside me every night and making plans for our future that she knew would never happen. For the first 2 years after Elena's disappearance, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I couldn't move forward with my life because I didn't know whether I was married to someone who'd chosen to leave me or widowed by someone who'd been forced to disappear. I hired private investigators who searched through Colombia, following leads that never materialized into concrete information about Elena's whereabouts or safety. I contacted Colombian authorities, American consular services, and international missing persons organizations. Mr. Morrison, we need you to consider the possibility that Elena Santos may not have been the person you believed her to be, explained Detective Sarah Williams, the lead investigator on Elena's case for the Chicago Police Department. What do you mean? We mean that Elena Santos may have been an assumed identity. We can find no record of her existence prior to her arrival in the United States 5 years ago. No birth certificate, no educational records, no family members who can verify her background. Elena Santos, the woman I'd married, might not have legally existed before she'd created herself as an American immigrant. The background she'd shared with me, the family history, the reasons for leaving Colombia, even her real name, might have been an elaborate fiction designed to explain an identity she'd constructed for reasons I couldn't understand. Detective Williams, are you telling me I was married to someone using a false identity? We're telling you that Elena Santos appears to have been a carefully constructed persona rather than a genuine personal history. The question is whether that construction was done for legal reasons, witness protection, refugee status, escaping domestic violence, or for illegal reasons we haven't identified. The possibility that Elena had been living under an assumed identity explained why her family couldn't attend our wedding, why she had no contact with people from her past, and why she'd been able to disappear so completely when she decided to leave. But it didn't explain why she'd chosen to leave, or whether she'd left to protect me from something or simply to escape from a marriage that had become inconvenient for whatever life she'd been hiding. After 2 years of investigation that revealed nothing concrete about Elena's current whereabouts or safety, I made the painful decision to have her declared legally dead and to begin rebuilding my life as a widower rather than an abandoned husband. James, you've done everything possible to find her, my sister Margaret told me during one of our conversations about my decision to stop the search. You've spent your savings, your time, and your emotional health trying to find someone who clearly doesn't want to be found. At some point, you have to choose to live your life. I filed for a declaration of presumed death, returned to work full-time, and tried to build a life that could accommodate the loss of someone who'd taken my heart with her when she disappeared. 3 years later, I'd succeeded in creating something that looked like normalcy. I'd been promoted to partner at my accounting firm, bought a house, and begun dating someone who understood that I came with complicated emotional baggage that might never be fully resolved. I need you to know that I may never stop wondering what happened to my first wife, I told Catherine during one of our early conversations about our relationship's potential. I understand that, Catherine replied. But I also need to know that you're building this relationship with me, not with the memory of someone who's been gone for 5 years. Catherine and I had been engaged for 6 months when Elena walked back into my life, carrying a child who'd inherited my nose and my stubborn cowlick. Before I tell you what Elena had been running from, and why she'd spent 5 years in witness protection while I thought she was dead. Let me know you're still invested. Comment, still here, or drop 100 points below so I know you're following along. What comes next is where 5 years of grief met one moment of devastating truth, and where I learned that sometimes people disappear to save the people they love from their own dangerous past. And just a heads up, the following events incorporate some dramatic storytelling elements for educational purposes. If that's not your style, feel free to click away now. But if you want to see how love and sacrifice can look like abandonment until you understand the whole truth, let's keep going. His name is Diego, Elena said again, watching me stare at the little boy who was clearly my son. He's 4 years old. He was born 6 months after I left. You were pregnant when you disappeared? I found out 3 days before we left for Costa Rica. I was planning to tell you when we got home from our honeymoon. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. Elena had discovered she was pregnant with our child, had gone on our honeymoon knowing she was carrying my baby, and had still chosen to disappear rather than build the family we'd been planning. Elena, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you stay and let me help you with whatever was wrong? Elena looked around my office again, noting the family photos, the business awards, the evidence of the successful life I'd built during her absence. Because you would have tried to protect me, and they would have killed you for interfering. She sat down in the chair across from my desk, lifting Diego onto her lap where he played quietly with a small toy car. James, my real name is Elena Vasquez. My family wasn't in the import-export business, they were in the drug business. My stepfather, Carlos Mendez, runs cocaine distribution from Colombia through Mexico and into the United States. Elena wasn't who I'd thought she was, but not because she'd been lying about her identity. She'd been lying about the danger that identity represented. When I left Colombia, I stole $2 million from Carlos and information about his operation that I traded to the DEA for safe passage to the United States. I thought I was far enough away, hidden enough, safe enough to build a normal life. What changed? Carlos found me. 3 days before our honeymoon, I got a call from someone who knew details about our wedding, about you, about where we lived and worked. They told me I had 72 hours to return the money and disappear forever, or they'd kill you and make me watch before they killed me. Elena had been running not from our marriage, but toward danger that would have destroyed both of us if she'd stayed. The DEA put me in witness protection that same day. I couldn't tell you because any contact with my previous life would have put you in danger. I couldn't stay because Carlos's people were already watching you. Elena, you disappeared for 5 years. You let me think you were dead. You had my child and raised him without me. How is that protecting our marriage? Because Carlos was arrested and convicted 8 months ago. His operation was dismantled, his associates were imprisoned or deported, and the DEA finally cleared me to resume contact with my previous life. Elena reached into her jacket and pulled out a thick envelope containing official documentation of her witness protection status, her cooperation with federal drug enforcement, and her recent clearance to end her protective custody. I've been living in Arizona under the name Maria Gonzalez. Diego knows you as the father I told him stories about, the man I was married to before we had to go into hiding for our safety. What did you tell him about me? I told him you were brave and kind and that you loved us both, but that bad people made it dangerous for us to live together. I told him that someday, when the bad people were gone, we might be able to see you again. Diego looked up at me with 4-year-old curiosity, studying my face with the intensity of a child trying to match reality to stories he'd been told. Are you my daddy? He asked, his voice carrying Elena's slight accent. Yes, I said, though the word felt strange in my mouth. I'm your daddy. Mommy said you build numbers, Diego continued, looking around my office with interest. She said you help people with money. Elena had been telling our son about my work as an accountant, about the man she'd married and had to leave behind. She'd been keeping me alive in his imagination while letting me believe they were both dead. Elena, why now? Why bring him to meet me now instead of just calling to let me know you were both alive? Elena's expression became more serious, and she glanced at Diego to ensure he was still occupied with his toy. Because Carlos had a younger brother, Miguel, who wasn't arrested with the rest of the organization. Miguel has been looking for me for 5 years, and he recently figured out that Elena Santos was actually Elena Vasquez. What does that mean? It means I'm not completely safe yet. It means Diego isn't completely safe. And it means that being in contact with you might put you in danger again. Elena had come to tell me about our son not because the danger was over, but because it was escalating and she wanted me to know about Diego before anything happened to either of them. The DEA thinks Miguel is planning to come to the United States to find me. They've offered to put me in long-term protection, possibly permanent relocation, but what? But Diego deserves to know his father before we disappear again. And you deserve to know that you have a son, even if circumstances make it impossible for us to be a family. I was looking at my son, a beautiful little boy who'd inherited my stubborn cowlick and Elena's dark eyes, knowing that I might be meeting him just in time to lose him again. Elena, there has to be another way. There has to be a solution that doesn't involve you and Diego disappearing forever. James, Miguel Mendez isn't just a drug dealer. He's a murderer who's spent 5 years planning revenge against the woman who destroyed his family's business. There's no negotiating with him, no hiding from him permanently, no legal system that can guarantee our protection. That's when Elena told me about her plan, the reason she'd really come to my office. I want Diego to stay with you while I handle Miguel. What do you mean, handle Miguel? I mean I'm going to meet with him, return whatever money he thinks I still owe, and convince him that his revenge is complete and his family's honor is restored. Elena was planning to sacrifice herself to ensure Diego's safety, and she wanted me to raise our son if her plan failed. Elena, you can't do this alone. Let me help. Let me hire security, legal protection, something that doesn't involve you walking into a meeting with a murderer. James, you can help by taking care of Diego if I don't come back. You can help by giving him the kind of life I wanted to give him, safe, stable, full of choices instead of fear. Elena was asking me to become a father to a child I just met, while preparing for a confrontation that might make me a single parent within days. The meeting with Miguel Mendez was arranged for the following week in a neutral location, a public restaurant in downtown Chicago where Elena believed she'd be safe from immediate violence but able to negotiate terms for permanent safety. I've been working with the FBI to coordinate this meeting, Elena explained during one of our conversations while Diego played in my apartment. They'll have surveillance, but they can't intervene unless Miguel explicitly threatens violence. Elena, this is insane. You're walking into a trap based on the hope that a drug dealer and murderer will be reasonable about revenge. I'm walking into a negotiation where I have something Miguel wants, information about where the rest of his brother's money is hidden, and he has something I want, which is a guarantee that Diego will be left alone. What if he doesn't agree? What if he decides that killing you isn't enough revenge? Then Diego will be safe with you, and at least one of us will have escaped the consequences of my family's choices. Elena's plan was to trade information about Carlos's remaining assets for Miguel's promise that he'd consider his family's revenge complete and would never pursue Elena or Diego again. I spent that week getting to know my 4-year-old son while preparing for the possibility that I might be raising him alone. Diego was intelligent, curious, and remarkably adaptable, qualities he'd apparently inherited from both parents. "Daddy, why does Mommy have to talk to the bad man?" he asked one evening while we were reading bedtime stories. "Because sometimes adults have to solve problems that started before children were born. Mommy wants to make sure you're always safe." "Will you take care of me if Mommy can't come back?" "Yes, Diego. I'll take care of you no matter what happens." The morning of Elena's meeting with Miguel, she came to my apartment to say goodbye to Diego and to give me legal documentation establishing my parental rights and custody arrangements. "If something goes wrong today, there are people who will help you," she said, handing me a folder containing contact information for FBI agents, family court attorneys, and child psychologists who specialized in helping children process trauma. "Elena, please don't do this. Please let me find another way. James, I've been running from this for 6 years. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of hiding, tired of raising our son in fear. This ends today, one way or another." Elena knelt down to hug Diego goodbye. "Be good for Daddy, okay? I love you more than anything in the world. I love you too, Mommy. Come back soon. I will if I can, baby. But if I can't, remember that everything I did was to keep you safe." Elena left for her meeting with Miguel at 2 p.m. At 4:30 p.m., FBI agent Lisa Martinez called to tell me that the meeting had concluded successfully. "Elena is safe," Agent Martinez said. Miguel agreed to her terms. He'll be leaving the country tomorrow, and Elena will remain under protective monitoring for 6 months to ensure he honors their agreement. Elena returned to my apartment that evening, exhausted but alive, carrying documentation that officially ended her 5-year nightmare. "It's over," she said, collapsing onto my couch where Diego immediately climbed into her lap. Miguel took the information I gave him and agreed that his brother's debt is paid. "We're free." But freedom came with complications neither of us had anticipated. Elena's return to my life after 5 years created emotional and practical challenges that couldn't be resolved through one successful negotiation with a dangerous criminal. I was engaged to Catherine. Elena was legally my wife. Diego was my son but had been raised by his mother without any input from me. "James, I know this is complicated," Elena said during one of our many conversations about how to move forward. "I know you've built a life that doesn't include me. I know I don't have the right to ask you to abandon that life for a relationship with someone who disappeared without explanation." "Elena, you didn't disappear without explanation. You disappeared to save my life. But that doesn't change the fact that we're different people now than we were 6 years ago." Elena had spent 5 years in witness protection, learning to be constantly vigilant, learning to trust no one completely, learning to make survival decisions that prioritized safety over relationships. I'd spent 5 years grieving, healing, and building a life based on the assumption that she was gone forever. "I don't know how to be married to someone I thought was dead," I told Elena honestly. "And I don't know how to be a father to a child I missed the first 4 years of his life. I don't know how to be in a relationship with someone who has every reason not to trust me," Elena replied. "But I know Diego deserves to have his father in his life, even if his parents can't figure out how to be together." We decided to focus on co-parenting Diego while figuring out whether our marriage could be rebuilt or whether it needed to be formally ended so we could both move forward honestly. Catherine, remarkably, was understanding about the impossible situation Elena's return had created. "James, you need to figure out what you want your life to look like now that you know the truth about why Elena left," she said during our conversation about our engagement. "I can't compete with a love story that involves witness protection and life-threatening sacrifice. Catherine, it's not about competition. It's about the fact that I genuinely don't know who I am anymore, Elena's husband, Diego's father, or the man who was building a future with you. Then take the time to figure it out. But do it honestly, without trying to protect my feelings at the expense of understanding your own." 6 months of family therapy, individual counseling, and careful co-parenting helped Elena and me understand that while we'd both changed too much to resume our marriage as though nothing had happened, we could build a new kind of relationship based on our shared love for Diego and our mutual respect for the sacrifices we'd both made. "I will always love the man who married me 6 years ago," Elena told me during one of our sessions. "But that man was married to a woman who doesn't exist anymore. We're different people now, and we deserve the chance to find relationships that fit who we've become." Elena and I divorced amicably after 18 months of working through the practical and emotional complexities of her return. She moved to Chicago to be near Diego, established a new career as a translator specializing in legal documents for immigration cases, and slowly built a life that wasn't defined by running from danger. I maintained primary custody of Diego while ensuring he spent significant time with Elena. Learning to be a father to a 5-year-old who'd already formed strong opinions about the world was challenging, but Diego's resilience and adaptability made the transition easier than I'd feared. "Daddy, why did Mommy have to hide from the bad men?" Diego asked one evening while we were building with blocks. "Because sometimes adults make mistakes that create problems for their families. Mommy left to make sure those problems didn't hurt us." "But she came back when the problems were solved?" "Yes, she came back as soon as it was safe." Diego's understanding of his unusual family situation was remarkably sophisticated for a 5-year-old, probably because Elena had always been honest with him about their circumstances in age-appropriate ways. 3 years later, Elena is remarried to an immigration attorney who understands her background and supports her work helping other people navigate complex legal situations related to family safety. Diego, now 7, splits his time between both households and has adapted beautifully to having an extended family that includes 2 sets of parents who prioritize his well-being above their own complicated history. I'm also remarried, to Susan, a teacher who specializes in helping children from unusual family circumstances adjust to traditional school settings. Susan understands that Diego comes with a history that affects his perspective on safety, trust, and family relationships, and she's helped me learn how to be a father to a child who's experienced more complexity than most adults. Diego's experience with his mother's protective disappearance has given him unusual maturity about family relationships, Susan observed during one conversation about his development. He understands that love sometimes requires difficult sacrifices, but he also understands that those sacrifices should be temporary and that families should be honest with each other about problems. Elena and I have developed a co-parenting relationship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to Diego's emotional and physical safety. We communicate regularly about his needs, coordinate our parenting approaches, and ensure that he feels secure in both households. Sometimes I think about what our life would have been like if I hadn't had to disappear, Elena told me during one of our conversations at Diego's school play. But then I look at how strong and adaptable Diego is, how much he understands about love and sacrifice, and I think maybe our complicated story taught him things that a conventional family wouldn't have. Diego is thriving academically and socially, though he occasionally asks sophisticated questions about family loyalty, personal safety, and the difference between secrets that protect people and secrets that hurt them. "Dad, if someone you loved was in danger, would you disappear to protect them?" he asked recently while we were driving home from soccer practice. "I'd try to find a way to protect them that didn't require disappearing," I replied. "But if disappearing was the only way to keep them safe, then yes, would do what your mother did." "Would you come back when the danger was over?" "Absolutely. The only reason to stay away from people you love is if being near them puts them in danger." Diego's questions reflect his ongoing process of understanding his family's history and integrating the lessons about love, sacrifice, and protection that his mother's choices taught him. If there's one thing this experience taught me about love and family, it's this: sometimes the people who seem to abandon us are actually saving us from consequences we can't see. Elena's disappearance felt like the ultimate betrayal until I understood that she'd been protecting me from violent criminals who would have killed me for interfering with their revenge. Her 5-year absence felt like abandonment until I learned that she'd been raising our son while planning for the day when she could safely return to our lives. To everyone who's been abandoned by someone they loved, consider the possibility that you don't know the whole story. Some people disappear because they're selfish or afraid of commitment. But others disappear because they're protecting the people they love from dangers those people can't imagine. And to everyone who's facing a choice between protecting someone you love and staying in their life, there might be alternatives to disappearing that you haven't considered. Seek help from people who understand dangerous situations. Don't assume that sacrifice requires secrecy. These family stories aren't easy to tell. They require admitting that love sometimes looks like abandonment, that protection sometimes requires betrayal, and that the people we think have hurt us most might actually have saved us in ways we'll never fully understand. But I believe they need to be told because there are millions of people out there living with the pain of unexplained abandonment, wondering if they were loved at all by people who might have loved them too much to stay. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever been left without explanation, or if you've ever had to choose between someone's safety and their happiness, I want you to know, love doesn't always look the way we expect it to look. Sometimes love requires sacrifice that can't be explained until years later. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it helped you understand something about sacrifice, protection, or the complexity of family loyalty, please share it. Subscribe to Family Reckoning so you never miss another story about families learning that love and loss aren't always what they appear to be. And remember, sometimes the people who disappear from our lives are the people who love us most. The question isn't whether they loved us, it's whether we can understand the kind of love that requires such devastating sacrifice. Note, this story contains dramatic elements created for educational and entertainment purposes. While based on real patterns of protective behavior and witness protection circumstances, specific details have been crafted to illustrate important principles about sacrifice and family loyalty. Always seek professional help for dangerous situations involving threats or criminal activity.